The red and blue lights hit the houses first. Not the street. Not the car. The houses. They bounce off windows, slide across white siding, flash through half-drawn curtains. Porch lights click on one by one. Doors open just enough for faces to appear. A quiet neighborhood, suddenly awake. A patrol car idles at the curb, engine humming low. Another pulls in behind it. Tires crunch softly on gravel. And standing in the middle of it all, barefoot, wrapped in a thin robe, phone still clutched in her hand, is the woman who made the call. She looks confused. Then annoyed. Then, slowly, afraid. An officer steps out, calm, professional. No rush. No drama. He adjusts his vest, closes the car door, and walks toward her. "Ma'am," he says evenly, "can you put the phone down for me?" She laughs once. A short, sharp sound. "I'm the one who called," she snaps. "You need to arrest him. He's the problem." The officer doesn't respond to that. He gestures again, firm this time. "Phone. Down." Behind her, a second officer opens the rear door of the squad car. The interior light clicks on. Quiet. Intentional. Neighbors lean closer. The woman's voice rises. "This is ridiculous. I run the homeowners association. That car has been an issue for months." The officer nods, as if acknowledging something minor, like the weather. "Hands behind your back, please." The words land wrong. You can see it on her face. "What?" She laughs again, louder. "No. You don't understand. I was enforcing the rules." That's when the handcuffs come out. Metal glints under the flashing lights. The sound is unmistakable. Final. Click. Her expression collapses into disbelief. "This is a mistake," she says quickly. "I had every right." "Ma'am," the officer interrupts, still calm, still steady. "You're being detained in connection with the unlawful removal of private property." A pause. "Unlawful what?" The word hangs there. Unlawful. Another neighbor steps onto the sidewalk. Someone across the street raises a phone. No one says a word. The officer gently but firmly turns her around. The robe slips. She stumbles, regains balance. Pride already gone. "You can't do this," she says, voice tight now. "That car was parked illegally." The officer doesn't argue. He guides her toward the open squad car. "Ma'am," he says, "you're under arrest for felony theft." That word hits harder than the cuffs. Felony. Her head snaps up. "That's insane." The officer pauses before placing her inside. "You authorized an unlicensed tow," he explains. "No paperwork. No notice. Vehicle removed without legal authority." Her mouth opens. Closes. Behind her, the empty space at the curb is visible. Fresh tire marks. Scratches on the asphalt where something heavy was dragged away. The neighbors are watching now. Fully. Silently. The door closes. Thunk. The lights keep flashing. Inside the car, she stares straight ahead, breathing fast, jaw locked. The woman who thought she was in control. The woman who thought she was enforcing a rule. She was wrong. The officer steps back, nods to his partner, and walks toward another house, the one directly across from the empty curb. The camera would linger there. On that space. On what's missing. Because this wasn't about parking. And it wasn't about rules. Here's how a parking spot turned into a felony. Before it ever became the car everyone whispered about, it was just a frame on rusted wheels. He found it years ago, half forgotten behind a clothes repair shop on the edge of town. Faded paint. Cracked leather. An engine that hadn't turned over in decades. Anyone else would have seen scrap. He saw potential. Not the loud kind. Not the flashy kind. The quiet kind that rewards patience. He was never a loud man. Never needed attention. He worked a job that paid well enough, kept his lawn trimmed, waved to neighbors, followed rules. The kind of person H always loved, at least on paper. Every evening after work, he'd pull the cover back just enough to look at it. Sometimes he'd sit there longer than necessary, hands resting on the steering wheel, imagining what it used to be. What it could be again. Restoration wasn't fast. Or cheap. Parts took months to source. Some had to be custom made. Others came from old collectors who only answered emails at odd hours and demanded patience more than money. There were nights he went to bed smelling like oil and metal, hands scraped raw, knuckles bruised. But slowly, piece by piece, the car came back. The engine purred again. The chrome shone. The lines, clean, unmistakable, turned heads without trying. It wasn't about showing off. It was about finishing something. That car became his marker. Proof that steady effort still mattered. That doing things the right way, slow, careful, by the book, still led somewhere worth reaching. When it was finally roadworthy, he didn't parade it around town. Didn't rev the engine or park it for attention. He parked it exactly where the rules allowed. In front of his own house. The neighborhood was quiet. Manicured lawns. Matching mailboxes. White fences that all looked the same if you weren't paying attention. Cars came and went, mostly modern, mostly forgettable. The car stood out, but never broke a rule. He checked. Twice. No fire lane. No restricted zone. No time limit violation. The HOA handbook sat highlighted on his kitchen table for weeks when he first parked it there. He followed every clause. Every footnote. Because to him, rules weren't obstacles. They were protection. And for months, nothing happened. Neighbors glanced at the car. Some smiled. One older man nodded approvingly once while walking his dog. Kids asked questions he politely answered. Peaceful. Predictable. Until the notes started appearing. First one was polite. Printed. Slipped under his windshield wiper. Please be advised that extended street parking is discouraged. Discouraged wasn't prohibited. He double-checked the handbook. Still compliant. The second notice came a week later. This one less friendly. Mentioned. Community standards. No citation. No violation number. Still compliant. Then came the letter. Official looking. HOA letterhead. Warning of potential fines. He attended the next HOA meeting. Sat in the back. Calm. Prepared. When his turn came, he spoke clearly. Pointed to the exact sections of the rules. Explained the restoration. The legality. The fact that the car hadn't moved because it didn't need to. Silence followed. Some board members avoided eye contact. One didn't. She leaned forward, lips pressed in, eyes fixed not on the rulebook, but on him. And on the car. That was the moment he understood something important. This wasn't about compliance. And it never had been. Because the car wasn't just metal and paint. It was his patience made visible. His discipline parked in plain sight. A reminder that control doesn't always belong to the loudest person in the room. And that bothered her. What he didn't know, what he couldn't know yet, was that every rule he followed would soon be used against him. And that the space in front of his house was about to become a battleground. Power didn't arrive all at once. It crept in quietly, through unopposed nominations, low attendance meetings, and neighbors who didn't care enough to vote. The Homeowners Association election came and went with barely a ripple. She won by default. A new title. A new badge of authority. A laminated nameplate placed neatly in front of her seat at the head of the table. President. She said the word often after that. In emails. In meetings. In casual conversations with neighbors who never asked. Now that I'm president. That's when the tone changed. What used to be suggestions became directives. What used to be guidelines became warnings. She spoke in phrases like community image and long-term property values, but her eyes always drifted back to the same subject. The car. She noticed everything about it now. How long it stayed parked. How people slowed down to look. How it didn't belong in a neighborhood where conformity was the real standard. The first fine arrived 2 weeks later. No code number. No photograph. Just a dollar amount and a deadline. He emailed back politely. Attached screenshots. Quoted the handbook again. Calm. Factual. Her response was immediate. You're interpreting the rules too narrowly. Narrowly. As if rules were flexible when she decided they were. The second fine doubled the amount. The third came with a threat, legal action, lien warnings, vague consequences that sounded serious without saying anything specific. At the next HOA meeting, she didn't wait for him to speak. She called him out by name. Projected photos of the car onto a screen like evidence. Zoomed in on nothing in particular. Let the room sit in silence while she talked. This vehicle, she said, tapping the pointer against the image, has become a disruption. Disruption. He stood when it was his turn. Didn't raise his voice. Didn't insult her. He didn't need to. He pointed to dates. Sections. Precedents. Other cars parked longer. Vans. Trailers. Ignored. He ended with a simple sentence. It's legal. That's when her smile changed. Not angry. Not embarrassed. Calculating. She leaned back in her chair and folded her arms. Just because something is legal, she said, doesn't mean it belongs here. The room shifted. Some neighbors looked down. Others stared straight ahead. No one challenged her. Power, he realized, didn't need to be loud when the room was already quiet. After that, the notices became personal. Handwritten notes. Bright colors. Placed deliberately. Once, she waited until he was outside and gestured openly toward the car. You know, she said, voice pleasant. People are talking. He met her gaze. About what? She smiled. About you. The implication was clear. Fall in line, or be isolated. He continued parking where he always had. He continued following every rule. That seemed to anger her more than defiance ever could. One evening, as he covered the car, he felt it, the sense of being watched. She stood across the street, arms crossed, robe pulled tight against the night air. No phone. No pretense. Just staring. This is your last warning, she said. He didn't argue. There's no violation. She took a step closer. Her voice dropped, losing its polished tone. That car is leaving one way or another. The words weren't shouted. They didn't need to be. They were a promise. He watched her turn away, robe brushing the pavement, already certain of something he couldn't yet see. And for the first time since the restoration began, he felt it. Not doubt. Not fear. But the cold awareness that rules only work when the person enforcing them respects the law. She didn't want compliance anymore. She wanted control. He wasn't even in the state. Work had pulled him out of town for 2 days, routine, unavoidable, the kind of obligation that usually meant nothing. He parked the car exactly where he always did, double-checked the cover, locked it, and left before sunrise. By nightfall, the street looked the same. Quiet. Orderly. Harmless. At 2:14 a.m., his phone vibrated on the hotel nightstand. One alert. Then another. Then a third. Motion detected. He sat up immediately, heart already racing, and opened the camera feed. The image was grainy but clear enough. Headlights. Not police. Not marked. An unbranded tow truck rolled slowly into frame, lights off, engine low. No reflective decals. No company name. No permit number on the side. It stopped directly in front of his house. The driver stepped out, hood up, face half hidden. He moved quickly, like someone who didn't want to be noticed. And then, she appeared. Not in a jacket. Not dressed for authority. A robe. Slippers. Hair pulled back without care. She crossed the street like this was routine. Like she'd done it before. She pointed. Gave short, sharp instructions. Her body language was unmistakable. Ownership. He watched, frozen, as the driver crouched and slid the metal arms under the tires. The car rocked once. Hard. A sound cut through the night, metal scraping asphalt. He tried calling the local police line. No answer. Tried again. Voicemail. The tow began anyway. Chains tightened. The car tilted slightly as it was pulled forward. The cover slipped, revealing the paint underneath. The headlights caught the curve of the hood, the one he'd spent months restoring by hand. He felt sick. On the screen, she folded her arms and watched. Calm. Satisfied. The truck dragged the car instead of lifting it properly. The rear bumper scraped. Sparks flashed briefly before disappearing into the dark. This wasn't professional. This was violence. Stop, he whispered to the phone, uselessly. By the time he reached a dispatcher, the feed went still. The tow truck pulled away, his car disappearing out of frame like it had never existed. The empty curb stared back at him. He flew home at first light. The space in front of his house was wrong. Too clean. Too empty. Fresh marks scarred the pavement where tires had been dragged. Neighbors avoided eye contact. One woman across the street closed her door the moment she saw him. He called the tow companies listed in the HOA directory. None had a record. He called the city impound lot. Nothing. Finally, he dialed the non-emergency police line again, standing on the sidewalk where his car had been hours before. The dispatcher paused longer than expected while typing. Sir, she said slowly, we have no record of a legal tow associated with your address. Silence followed. No authorization? He asked. No permit. No citation. No notice. The words landed heavier than anger. Because this wasn't harassment anymore. It wasn't overreach. It was theft. And somewhere, whoever took his car had done it without paperwork, without authority, and without a trace, except for one woman on a security camera, standing in a robe, watching it happen. The panic lasted exactly 3 minutes. Long enough for the adrenaline to burn off. Long enough for his hands to stop shaking. Long enough to understand one thing clearly. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't even an abuse of HOA authority. It was a crime. He sat at his kitchen table, laptop open, phone beside it, notebook already filled with times, dates, and screenshots. The security footage played again in silence. The unmarked truck. The chains. The robe. He didn't raise his voice. Didn't storm across the street. He smiled once. Because the moment she skipped the paperwork, she lost control. He started with the facts, clean, unemotional. Licensed tow operators required a visible permit. Police notification mandatory before removal. Notice posted at the location. Itemized paperwork provided to the owner. She had none of it. He called the police station and asked for a supervisor. Calm. Precise. Used the word theft instead of tow. That changed the tone immediately. An officer met him at the house within the hour. Older. Observant. The kind who listened more than he spoke. They watched the footage together. The officer paused the video on her face. Does she live here? He asked. Yes. HOA president? Yes. Another pause. And that truck? No markings. No permit. No contract. The officer leaned back slightly. Then this wasn't a tow. He nodded. I know. It's felony theft of a motor vehicle, the officer said, matter of fact. And conspiracy if she ordered it. There it was. Not revenge. Not drama. Law. The officer asked a simple question. Do you want to recover the car, or do you want to build a case? He didn't answer immediately. Because he understood something else now. People like her didn't expect resistance. They expected fear. Confusion. Emotional reactions they could exploit. She'd left too many fingerprints. He asked the officer what would happen if she talked. The officer smiled slightly. People like that usually do. The plan formed quietly. No confrontation. No accusations. Just an opportunity for her to explain herself. They pulled records from nearby scrapyards. One hit stood out, An intake call made early that morning. A car matching the description. Instructions to hold until further notice. Cash mentioned. No vignette. Perfect. The officer advised him not to go alone. But they both knew she wouldn't talk freely to police. Not yet. She still thought she was in control. That belief was the trap. By late afternoon, the officer was positioned 2 streets over. Unmarked car. Body cam ready. Radio open. He walked across the street alone. The sun was low now, casting long shadows across the same pavement where the car had been dragged hours before. Each step felt deliberate. Measured. He knocked. No answer. He knocked again. Footsteps approached. The door opened halfway. She stood there in daylight now, posture stiff, eyes sharp. "What do you want?" she asked. Calm. Polite. "I'm just trying to locate my car." She crossed her arms. "I told you. It violated community standards." He nodded slowly. "Which tow company did you authorize?" Her mouth tightened. "I don't have to tell you that." He smiled gently. "I already know it wasn't licensed." That landed. A flicker of uncertainty crossed her face. He continued, voice even. "If it's a legal tow, there should be paperwork. An impound record. A police notification." Silence stretched. Then she exhaled, annoyed. "Look, if you want it back, I can tell you where it is." He raised an eyebrow. "Where?" She hesitated. "Just long enough." "A yard?" she said. "Outside town." "And the fee?" She leaned closer, lowering her voice. "Cash." That was all it took. Across the street, an engine started quietly. She didn't notice the car at first. People like her rarely did. Not when they were talking. Not when they believed the room belonged to them. She focused on him instead, on the way he stood there without anger, without pleading. That alone irritated her. "I told you," she said, tone sharp. "This didn't have to be complicated." He nodded. "I agree." That threw her off. She stepped fully into the doorway now, one hand braced against the frame. "You leave it there, people complain. I fixed the problem. Simple." "By hiring an unlicensed tow?" he asked gently. She scoffed. "I know people." There it was. The quiet arrogance. The assumption that proximity to power was power. He glanced past her, deliberately, as if checking something behind her. She followed his gaze, then looked back. "Don't worry. The car's safe." "Safe where?" he asked. She rolled her eyes. "A yard. Off the books. You want it back, you pay." "How much?" She smiled for the first time. A small, pleased smile. "That depends on how quickly you want this to go away." The words settled between them. Extortion. He took a step back, as if considering it. "Cash only?" he asked. "Obviously. And no paperwork." She laughed softly. "Why would there be?" That laugh echoed longer than it should have. Behind her, somewhere down the street, a door closed. He met her eyes again. "And the scrapyard?" Her smile froze. "What about it? The one you told the driver to use if I didn't respond?" She stiffened. "I didn't say that." "You didn't have to," he replied. "It's on the call log." She opened her mouth, then stopped. For the first time, real uncertainty surfaced. Before she could speak again, a voice came from behind him. "Ma'am." She flinched. 2 uniformed officers stepped into view, movements smooth, rehearsed. One stood slightly to the side. The other closer, hand already near his cuffs. "Are you authorizing the removal of a vehicle without a permit?" the officer asked. She straightened instinctively. "I'm the HOA president." That wasn't the question. Her eyes darted. The street suddenly felt smaller. Brighter. "I was enforcing community rules," she said quickly. The officer nodded once. "Then you won't mind explaining why there's no tow authorization, no police notification, and why the operator you used isn't licensed in this state?" Silence. Her confidence collapsed all at once. It was just a warning, she said. I didn't think. That's enough. The officer interrupted. He stepped forward. You are under arrest for felony motor vehicle theft, conspiracy, and attempted extortion. Her face drained of color. This is ridiculous, she whispered. The cuffs came out. Click. The sound carried down the street. Curtains moved. Doors opened. Neighbors who had avoided eye contact hours earlier now watched openly. Another click. Her shoulders sagged as the reality settled in. I was just trying to keep the neighborhood clean, she muttered. The officer guided her toward the squad car. Ma'am, he said evenly, you committed a felony. As the door opened, she looked back at him, searching for something. Sympathy. Regret. He gave her nothing. Just silence. The door closed. Thunk. And for the first time since she'd taken office, the neighborhood was quiet again. They found the car before nightfall. Not because she told them where it was, she didn't get the chance, but because crimes leave trails, and she had never learned how to erase one. The scrapyard sat on the edge of the county, a place that smelled like oil and rust and things waiting to be destroyed. The manager didn't argue. He didn't need to. The officer read off the details. Unlicensed intake. No VIN recorded. Cash instructions. A note scribbled on a clipboard that simply said, hold for pickup. Pickup never came. The car sat behind a chain-link fence, dirt streaked along the lower panels, fresh scars where metal had scraped concrete. The rear bumper was gouged. The undercarriage bore the marks of carelessness, dragged, not lifted. Damage. Not fatal. But personal. He stood there for a long moment, hand resting on the roof, breathing in slowly. It hurt, but it was still there. Still his. Still reparable. That mattered. Evidence photos were taken. Reports finalized. The charges expanded quickly. Felony theft. Conspiracy. Attempted extortion. Abuse of authority. The HOA's legal counsel resigned within 48 hours. The board followed. By the end of the week, the association dissolved into silence, scrambling emails, emergency meetings, neighbors suddenly eager to distance themselves from a woman they had once applauded. Her house went quiet. The blinds stayed closed. A for sale sign appeared on the lawn 2 months later. The lawsuit moved faster than expected. Insurance refused to cover intentional criminal acts. Personal liability took its place. The settlement covered every repair, every tow-related cost, every legal fee, and then some. The car returned to the street weeks later, repaired, polished, unmistakable. Not as a statement. Not as revenge. As proof. Neighbors passed it differently now. No notes. No warnings. Just glances, some respectful, some uneasy. He didn't change where he parked. Didn't need to. The spot was never the issue. She'd wanted control. She'd wanted compliance. She'd wanted to erase something that reminded her she wasn't untouchable. In the end, she cleaned up the neighborhood. Just not the way she planned. Because the rules she tried to weaponize became the ones that ended her power. And the car? It stayed. Right where it belonged.